Folks, nice to be with you, and thank you for your time. As Neil said, we're going to look at creating a centralized project and portfolio management system, centralized PPM. And what we've done before in BrightWork is we've created one on Microsoft SharePoint, which is the blue box on the left. And what we did was we looked at Microsoft 365, and we saw Teams, SharePoint Online, Azure, Word, Excel Online, and of course Power Platform. And we said, why don't we create the infrastructure for a centralized project and portfolio management system using the Microsoft 365 tenant that you inherit. And then the other thing we decided to do was stick with what has worked for the last number of years, which was this approach of start, evolve. So on the one hand, you have the tooling and the technology that's really important, and the software. But on the other hand, you have the approach and the methodology, and how do you create a centralized project and portfolio management system, maybe even irrespective of whatever software solution you use. So, you know, so there's the software, which we look at, but there's also the approach. Now, we're certainly very happy to accompany you on that journey with services that would assist you as needed. But our mantra really on the software side would be software with templates on the solution side, and on the journey deployment adoption side, it would be start, evolve. So what I'm going to do in this demo, in this webinar, is bring you through the setup of a centralized PPM in 3 phases using our start, evolve. So you might start and get the first bit up and running and then let it settle. Then perhaps do a first evolve to mature it based on the feedback and based on what you want to do anyway, and then let that settle. And then perhaps do a second evolve. You know, so the old saying, Rome wasn't built in a day, and if it was, we'd have used their architects. So what you want to do is put it in bit by bit in a way that folks can absorb it. So that's start, first evolve, second evolve. And in each of them, I'll show you 3 candidate items. So it'll be kind of 9 elements. Now, your particular deployment or adoption, of course, could be different. But, you know, since the webinar is gold to give you a sense of how to create a centralized PPM, I thought this would be helpful. So let's look at the start, and we'll demo this in a minute. So the first thing you would want to do is create a project management success strategy, as it says in the top left of the slide deck. Project management success strategy. And we have a particular template and approach to do that that's comprehensive but not complicated. And in your project management success strategy, you might have lots of things you'd like to do, and you might elect to start with 2 or 3. So here's a sample of 3 elements you might wish to start with. The first might be a project light template. So you get lots of projects up and running with a reasonable, modest, not too much amount of project management. And then when you have lots of people managing lots of projects, and that first one is focused on your project manager audience and enabling them to control, you'll have team members on the projects who will be involved in lots of projects. So what you'll want to do is, number 2, perhaps give them visibility so that they can collaborate on 1 or more projects using something like My Work. And then your senior managers will be saying, well, look, this is great. We've got lots of projects, lots of team members interacting. Can I now see what's happening across my projects, please? So you might want to put in some dashboards to give visibility to your senior managers. So that's a sample start. So let's go into demo, and let's look and see what does that look like inside of Microsoft 365. As Michal said, using BrightWork 365 as the sample in this case. So now I am just going to, if I go here to my webcam, I'm just going to turn off my webcam so we're not distracted with that. I'm going to share my screen, and you now will be looking at a Microsoft 365 tenant with a URL here, and we're accessing it through a browser. So for this start, maybe I'll start with project. Well, actually, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick orientation here. So orientation-wise, what we have here are requests for new projects, which we'll see later. We have the actual resulting projects, and we have collections of projects into portfolios and programs. So that's very briefly my orientation. Now there's a navigation down the left, which kind of mirrors that. But as we go through the start, first and second evolve, we'll come across all of those as well. So in summary, we've got requests, projects, and portfolios, and these are all governed by templates. These are all governed by templates. As Michal said, by the way, if you have questions or feedback, please do pop them on the Q&A stack, and we will get to them and answer all of them for you. Okay, so our start then, as we saw a couple of minutes ago, might have three components. So if I go in here to my projects and I look at this first project, which is in this case an employee onboarding, hopefully that's something you're doing lots of. So if we look across the top, I just want to point out 6 items. So we have a charter that explains what the project is all about or hoping to achieve, like a project statement. We have a status, which is saying where is the project at right now. We have a roster of anybody who's been assigned work and is therefore on the project. We have a Gantt or a schedule of the tasks that are necessary to complete for this project. Within this project, we have my work, what have I got to do on this project, and a place for documents. So we've just got 6 items. Now you say, Éamonn, I count more than 6. Well, project settings and approvals and related are for the project manager. But for the project team, it can be, well, you could have more and less, or less as we'll show later. But in this case with Project Light, we've just got these 6 items. Now, if I highlight actually some of the newer things, Michal mentioned the new release, which actually shipped today, believe it or not, a little bit earlier today. If I look here, I've got a sprint 2, which is a stage we want to go through, or a portion of the project. And I've got 1 task done, and therefore the sprint 2 iteration or sprint or stage is not complete. So if I click this task underneath, then that task and the parent task, the parent becomes complete. And then, as you can see, there's a strike through here, or I can unclick it here. So it's quite easy. I could also actually do right mouse click my context menu and just do mark complete if I was more, if I was a keyboard kind of person. And down here, if I wish to add new tasks, I can go task 1, task 2. I'm in the bottom left in the green area, task 2, and I've just added a bunch of tasks, and I can then create a dependency between them quite easily. And in fact, if I wanted to create that dependency, I did it visually there. If I want to create that dependency here, I can just hit a drop down and I'll see all the tasks. And you'll see on the left-hand side, we have a virtual number assigned to each task to make it easier to identify the task in question. And then if I want, I can actually just delete that task there and so on. Actually, I could have actually, if I had multiple tasks from an Excel sheet or a Word doc, I could have actually pasted those in there and quickly added those as well. So in summary, we have a Project Light template, which is an easy way to start the projects up and running and to get multiple projects going. Now, as I was saying, if you get multiple projects going, then folks will have lots of work to do across lots of projects, which is not untypical. So you might want to give people a My Work link in your centralized PPM. And here you see all the work that I have to complete. So if I complete new hire paperwork and I mark it done, so it's gone green and it's gone. So it's off my open list. And if I thought, actually, I'm not really properly finished that, I could go back to My Work All. I could find that one, unclick it. It becomes unclicked, so it's gray there. And if I go back to My Work Open, it'll be there for me. So quite easy to find and give feedback to the project on what's done and what's not done. Of course, you can double click and enter into it and add more details as needed. You'll also see that the My Work includes not just tasks, but it can have tasks, risks, issues, actions, and so on. And some of those items, for example, a risk can have multiple tasks within it. You know, monitor the task, action the contingency, do a mitigation action so the risk may not come to fruition. And you'll see in that case, some of these are done, so they're marked in progress. And then when they're all done, it'll be marked complete. So it's smart enough to understand that. So we now have in our start, lots of projects up and running using something like a project light. For project managers and the project teams, we have team members who have a My Work area to go to, which makes their work visual and actionable. And then we've got to think about the senior managers, the people who have to manage across multiple projects. So I click dashboards and I click projects dashboards. And this is something, these are dashboards created with Power Apps, not Power BI, which we'll see in a couple of minutes. So obviously less licensing cost, lighter touch, faster probably for folks to start with if you want a quick start. You may go for more, that would be dependent on your project management success strategy. Another thing you can do is you've got projects here and you've got a list of all the projects and you can have different views on those projects, or you can export those projects to Microsoft Excel and then circulate them that way. So your senior managers have a number of options from a visibility point of view very quickly. So in summary, well, why don't we actually go back to this slide deck? In summary, and I should put into slideshow mode. So if I go back one slide. So in summary, for your start, what you've elected to do is you've said, I have a project management success strategy. It dictates lots that I'd like to achieve. It has stuff on a backlog that I'm going to get to later. And it has the start I want to get for my centralized project and portfolio management system. And it says, I'll put in a project light template, get lots of projects using it. I'll give team members My Work, and I'll give senior managers some starting dashboards. And then I will support that, help the organizations adopt it properly, take the feedback, and then at some later point when it's bedded in, I will do my first evolve of the centralized PPM. So what you would do is, if you look at the top left of the slide, you would do a project management success review. How is my centralized PPM doing so far? And again, we have a template and we could certainly help you through that. And what you end up doing is you end up revisiting and revising your project management success strategy. And you say, where to next? And again, by way of example, and your context, of course, would be different. Let's assume for the purpose of this demo, as you advance your PPM, maybe there are 3 other items you wish to add at this stage from the feedback and from your backlog in the project management success strategy. So number 1 and 2 could be 2 new templates, which we'll see in a minute. A project standard and a project structured. And you, of course, can label these very different. the idea, as you can see actually on the right-hand side of this deck, you can see the level of management, light, standard, structured, and the different templates available within BrightWork 365 to manage work, projects, programs, and so on. So essentially what standard and structured do is they add more project management. And who are you targeting? As it says in the orange on the slide, you're targeting the project managers and the project teams, and you're giving them the option to add more project management process and maturity and management. And the third thing you might want to do is, based on feedback and perhaps based on your backlog, is give your senior managers more visibility. And maybe in this case, with Power BI reports, again, inside your Microsoft 365 tenant. That's key, really, isn't it? Is that you're creating your centralized project and portfolio management system inside your secure and safe Microsoft 365 tenant using your security and setup. All right, so let's look at this first evolve and see what does it look like in practice. So we said the first thing we would do maybe was add a project with a little bit more project management. So if I look at this particular one's a marketing project, deploy marketing automation. You can see here that if you look across the tab list, that we've added status reports. We had status, we've now added status reports, actions, and issues. So we've added 3 more items. Now, you may add more or you may add less, but you get the idea that you're expanding, in this case, the project management maturity. You might ask, why didn't you deploy this earlier? Well, of course you could. You could. But the strategy we're sampling here is we're saying, get people up and running quickly and get them used to working in a standardized way with a little bit maybe less project management to begin with, and have them asking for more and wanting more instead of suffocating them with too much to begin with. And they say, oh, this is too much, I can't handle it, I'm overwhelmed. You definitely don't want to do that in our experience. So what does this project standard one look like? And again, you could call this something different. Well, just something to point out is, you've got Microsoft Teams integration. So what does that mean? So what it means is we've been looking at this in the demo through a browser lens. What we're looking at here is if my preferred interface is Microsoft Teams, and then I go into a team and I've got channels. So I've got a channel for each of the projects. So from the channel, I can access the solution, and I can access the conversations in Teams and so on. So that's maybe one thing to highlight. Perhaps another thing to highlight is if I click on documents, I see here I've got a development deliverable. And remember, I'm accessing from the solution. And what it's doing is, of course, it's surfacing a SharePoint online library. As I single click there, I can see edit, check in, check out, and so on. And I can see new upload. So in those last 2 examples, what we're seeing is using the centralized project and portfolio management system. I'm also using, we've seen Power Platform, we've seen browser, and we've now just seen SharePoint Online and Microsoft Teams, and basically all the solutions that you're used to using inside of Microsoft 365 or M365, if that's what you call it, you're leveraging here as well. Status reports, like we looked at status a minute ago. So for example, if I say my status is red, and I maybe add comments about it, and I save that. The overall status in this case went to red because I put one of the indicators red, because we have elected in our project settings to automatically set it, but you could elect to manually set it. And I save my status. So anytime somebody comes in and looks at this project, they can see the status. But if they want to see a historical versions of status, you can just create, and you see there's 2 here, you can just do new status report, and it will scrape all of the information from the project manager, portfolio, the status, the start dates. So it'll gather that information very quickly and present it in a status report, so you don't have to do it. And then you can add your own color commentary to it here, and you can email the sponsor, include additional recipients and so on. And actually there's a new one requested by our customers. Email this report optionally to the project team as well. So there's an example of a project standard template with more project management. Now, if I go back and I look at a project structured template, which, as the name might suggest, has more project management. So in this case, it is risks, costs, and communications added to the issues, actions, and status report that were added to light. And in a couple of minutes, we'll show you how these can be configured and changed without programming. So, some of the things you might look at here, for example, and this would be in all the templates. So you look at your Gantt, your schedule, you've got this green today line. If I look at critical path, this shows me here where I got to be worried. I got to make sure these get done on time, or else my project will slip. We have actually baselines. So there's that orange is the baseline of the project, and if I start moving stuff around, then obviously we're slipping away from the original baseline. So we've got these project management capabilities, of course. Now, to just highlight maybe something new in this release. So I've clicked project settings, which I can only see if I'm a project manager. Oh, by the way, there's the setting I had set health automatically rather than manually. And you can switch that as a project manager. So if I click on the schedule settings, what I see here on the left is that the global settings set by our PMO are we work a Monday to Friday, 5-day week. And of course, that could be different if you're in a different region of the world. Now, but for this project, because we're under pressure and because we've agreed, and because the customer needs it, we've decided that we're going to have a 6-day working week for the duration of this project, all agreed. So we make this a 6-day working week, or it could be a 4-day working week, so that when the schedule is done, it will override the global settings and use these local settings. And actually, we also in global settings can have what are the holidays, or like July 4th, St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, Christmas Day, and so on. So we can put in days that we know everybody's off, that we don't want scheduled. But then we can, at a local project level, have exception days where we override those as well. So a lot of flexibility for those who require it. And not everybody requires it. It's available in all templates, but you may only use it on some. That's your choice. So really what you've got there is you've got this notion of much more flexible calendar schedules. Your work week could start on a Tuesday. You could work a 3-day week from a project management point of view, with the other days saved for other work. You can have common holidays and non-working days, or not, as you so wish. So what we've seen so far are, in this first Evolve, 2 templates. So maybe what we want to do is look at the third area. So the third part of the Evolve, and in our sample Evolve, we had said, why not add Power BI, much more attractive, visually interactive charts? So for example, if I'm a senior manager and I come into this and I click the yellow, then it immediately drops down to the 3 projects that are yellow or in danger, or red that are real danger. And I get straight into those and I can click and see those and so on. Or if I want to see what projects are not started, they're the 3 that are not started. And I have slicers up here and so on. So lots of, and you can see other tabs down here with other Power BI reports. And of course, because it's Power BI, you can add your own, and we can certainly help you do that and extend that level of reporting. So if we go back to our slide deck, we go into slideshow mode there. So what were we looking at? We were looking at the first evolve. So you're evolving your centralized project and portfolio management system bit by bit in a way that you'll have a successful deployment and adoption. And these were the 3 items we added in our sample, 2 different templates and more dashboards. And in orange, these were the actors we were targeting: project managers, project teams, and senior managers. And you'll see that's a theme we've had in each of, in the start, the evolve, and now we're going to look at a second evolve. You know, we're targeting those audiences, giving everybody something on each turn of the wheel. So maybe you let the first evolve bed in. You support it, you help people with it, you gather feedback, and then, as it says in the top left, you do your project management success review, where you're revisiting and revising your project management success strategy. And maybe that strategy, based on what you originally wanted to do from your backlog, based on the feedback and the learnings, because you want to be very open and cognizant of those, maybe you decide these are the 3 items you add in this evolve. So maybe there's project request management, where you're essentially increasing the governance. And it's probably someone who's in the equivalent of a PMO type role who will set this up. And really what you're trying to do is you're trying to make sure that the right projects get started at the right time with the right resources, and projects that shouldn't get started don't. Maybe second thing you want to do is add more dashboards. Perhaps at this stage you want to add resource utilization. Could be something you want to do. Is advanced for a lot of organizations. And then maybe thirdly, you want to configure and change the templates based on the feedback, and maybe add more templates. Again, helping your project teams with standardization, and your resource utilization is helping your senior managers with visibility. So let's get out of the slides, go back to the solution, and look inside Microsoft 365 with BrightWork 365 and see what that looks like. So project request management. So if I click into project request management, I have different views, of course, of my original requests. So I've got all requests, and there was a hardware project, so I just do a search or a find, and I find the original request that was approved in this case, that ended up giving birth to this particular project, the hardware upgrade. And here you can see in the first tab the details that were put in, including perhaps documents, in order to request this project. And you can configure these forms to add in the fields that you wish. And you can see there's a submit request there. You can see also that we have another tab which includes the details of the resulting project. You know, there's the project manager, the sponsor, what portfolio, and so on. The template that was used. You can see that we have a tab that governed the approvals that were used to vet this project. In this case, it went from draft to accepted and accepted to approved. And other templates we have more and have less stages. So you can concertina the amount of stages you want for these particular requests. And then you see you've got a history of who approved what when and any comments they might have made, and an audit trail or an audit history as well. So what you're looking at here is quite a simple but comprehensive request management system. By the way, there's a request app with this. So if you want to have an app with just the request management piece, and you want to give that to lots of people, BrightWork will give you a license to do that without a cost. So lots of people can request projects, which is what you want coming into your funnel. And then you decide which projects get accepted, rejected by going through a governance process like this. And then you have the option to automatically create the project if you wish. Like, you know, at the end of this, do we automatically create the project, or do we let the PMO intervene to create the project? So you can govern all that. So that might be the first thing you do in this evolve cycle: introduce project request management for increased governance. So maybe the second thing you want to do is add to the senior management dashboards, and maybe in this case you're adding to resource utilization. Now, actually, I'm just going to click on the project calendar one first, and you see here, it's interesting that you see the various projects that I have access to, and you can see here that I've got, some of them have a working week with 5 days, and some 6 days starting on a Sunday, and that's taken into account in the resource utilization reporting. So if I click the first tab, now, by the way, if I click F11, if I have white space, depending on my screen size, I can get a better view there. So here I'm down to a month view. So there's March and April. And actually, if I want, I can make it 16 weeks, or I can make it 26 weeks. See, I'm pushing in the bottom right. And then I've got March, April, May, and so on. And what we're looking at, the various color schemes, as you can see in the bottom left, is whether someone's unallocated, not allocated at all, underallocated, which means they have capacity, fully allocated, which means they're 100%, or over-allocated. And actually, if I go and look at the week view, you can see that some people are actually available 48 hours, which means they're on the 6-day projects. And you could have people on 4-day projects, or 3-day projects, or 5-day projects, and their availability would be different. And in fact, on a particular task, which I didn't show earlier, you can actually say that someone's working on this task for the next 2 weeks, but they're only available 20% of their time for this task. And that will filter through to this as well. And if you want to drill down a bit, you can go to this resource dashboard and say, you know, let me just look at Anne, and let me look at Anne's work across the various projects that Anne is involved in. And then let me look at the tasks and the assignments and so on. So that might be a second thing you do in this evolve. And the last thing in our sample evolve is maybe you go into the templates. And if I look here at the project, these are the various templates in this environment. So if I look at the Project Light template, and Project Light standard and structured come out of the box. So if I look here, you know, I can see the metadata about the template. I can see if there's an approval required. So as you go from stage to stage, project manager may do that manually, or you may put in an approvals process, like a stage gate. And you can set that up in the template here as easy as this. You also have, actually see there, create copy. If you wanted to create a copy of this and change it, that's how easy it is to get a new template. If I look at form configurator, this shows you, you know, in this case for the Project Light, I don't have risks, I don't have costs, I don't have issues, I don't have actions. So it's that easy to configure the templates. No programming required. I mean, for example, if I look at status and I look at indicators, you see in this Light template, I don't have cost, time, scope, because it's just too much for a Project Light template. For my schedule, you know, I've percent complete, comment, current start, current finish, and I'm not worried about target starts and finish. So you get this notion of templates very configurable within the templates environment without programming. If I click projects, this shows me the list of projects that were created by this template. So if I go, and I can see whether they're in progress or not. So if I go, if I have the permission, changing the configuration, I'll know which templates, which projects will be changed. So I can see if that's really what I want to do. So let me go back to the slide deck again, and we're nearly into the Q&A. So I want to go slideshow mode. That's it. Oops. So we said in our sample, we had a project management success strategy. We put in the start, the first evolve, and later the second evolve. And these were the items we put into the second evolve. How did we decide? Well, we were revisiting and revising the project management success strategy as part of the project management success review. And we were learning from the feedback from the first few weeks or months of adoption. And we were pouring that feedback into our project management success strategy and coming up with how we wish to evolve it. All right.
Éamonn, there's one or two questions here about licenses and requirements. Could you give us a broad overview of what one would need for BrightWork 365?
Sure. If you're using Microsoft 365, you probably have a lot already. So the key is to have Microsoft 365 licensing because we install in your tenant. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the type of licenses would be your standard access to like the likes of SharePoint and one of the e-licenses, but also then Power Apps, a Power Apps license, and if you wish to use Power BI, and then a BrightWork 365 license. Now, on our, and I'm happy to answer more questions on that for folks as needed. On our website, without boring you to death with the details, on our website, you'll definitely find the more detailed explanation of exactly what licenses, and Adam certainly be able to walk you through that as well. But the good news is, you know, for a lot of organizations, they're already using Microsoft 365. They have a lot of these licenses. So it's just a matter of checking, do you have all the ones needed? Yeah.
Sure. Jose has a question about integrations. I wonder, can you talk to us broadly about the kind of integrations that we have with BrightWork 365, such as, you know, tracking and financial tracking and that kind of thing, I think is his specific example.
Sure, yeah. So this is a very good story, really, because again, we're leveraging the Microsoft 365 platform. And inside of that, you have Microsoft Power Platform. And Power Platform has a number of components, Power Apps, Power BI, which we saw. And actually, I neglected to mention, so I'm glad you asked the question, Jose. I neglected to mention Power Automate. And Power Automate really is the workflow engine. And Power Automate at this stage has over 1,000 connectors. And one of them is in the, many of them to financial systems, but one in particular to SAP, as is indicated in your question. So rather than having to program up a storm, what you can actually do is you can use the Power Automate SAP connector, and you can connect from your SAP into the Power Platform, which is the Dataverse environment / database, and that's how that works. Now, what we would do with you is we would work with you to see what connections you wanted to make and that would be dependent on your local process. But it's not as arduous as it would have been a number of years ago in different environments because of those Power Automate connectors, including the SAP one. So that you're in good shape there.
Nice. Michelle wants a little bit more detail about installation. She asks, it's built on our tenant, so is it installed and then they configure? Maybe you could talk a little bit more about the deployment of BrightWork 365 in the user's tenant.
Yeah, good question. Happy to answer that, Michelle. So the short answer to your question, Michelle, is you've nailed it. You're right. So you always want to control your Microsoft 365 environment. You don't want anything rogue in there. The beauty of using your own tenant is that you completely control it. So what we would typically do, you'd work with one of our folks, and what we would do is we would give you a kit, and you would install it usually in a dev or a test environment, and put it through its paces, and then do whatever configurations you like. So for example, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we ship with various templates. We saw a slide deck of it earlier, a slide of it, project light, standard, structured, new product introduction, product update, and so on. And you might say, I'll start with project light, but you might want to take some stuff out of our light. So that would be configured and just tested in your dev and test environment. And then when you're happy with that, you would move it to your production environment. And then like today, we would come out with new releases with release notes and upgrade guides and so on. And then we would pass that to you, and you would work with our team and your own folks, of course. And you could say, okay, I like that new release because there's some cool stuff in it. And thank you for taking our feedback. We're happy to see the stuff we've asked for in it. And then that would get applied when you're ready to your test environment, and it would move forward. And then the other thing, of course, that happens, Michelle, is that Microsoft improved the Power Platform and Microsoft 365. So something I didn't show today was that I see in our test environments, I see that in the views, so you look at lots of projects or lots of issues or lots of risks, and you look at views or lists of those, Microsoft are introducing group by, which has been in SharePoint for years. So that's now coming into the Power Platform finally. So all those advances would be available to you as well. So hopefully that answers the question, Michelle.
Sure. I'm not sure if you covered it as well, but it's worth mentioning that the new release, the details of that new release would be published in an extensive knowledge base as well, which will be available to you when you're using the product, which is also really helpful.
You know what? I'm just going to share my screen here. Thank you for mentioning that. So I'm just taking Adam's slide down there.
On top of the help you would get from your customer success.
Yeah, but you know, thank you for mentioning that, because I actually, in my demo outline, after the second evolve, I was meant to show you that. So yeah, good catch, Michal. So here in the help, right? So this is the solution, by the way. We're looking at the same solution. And I just clicked help, which you would have seen, but I didn't click. And then you know, it explains requests, projects, portfolios, getting started, and you've got, you know, kind of onboarding, training, and so on, customer success, the deployment approach, the start evolve approach we talked about, the administration, which would explain like some of Michelle's questions and so on and so forth. So we're happy to accompany you on the journey with start and evolve services, and helping you set up the project management success strategy and the install and so on. And we're also very happy to give you all that information so that you can build up that competence inside your own organizations and your own project management offices and project managers and so on.
Yeah, that knowledge base, it's really great. It just helps you put context on the information, and it makes using the solution so much easier. Folks, I'm
Yes.
conscious of time. We said we'd keep you for 45 minutes, and of course, we kept you for a few minutes longer. So just to reiterate that if you do want to have a chat with Adam, the easiest way to book a quick chat with them is through the link I put in the chat, but of course his contact details are there already. Please keep an eye out for an email from Adam tomorrow. He'll send you out a recording of today's webinar. And as I said, we'll send out any slides that we use today as well. I want to thank Éamonn for a brilliant presentation and for taking all our questions today. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And hopefully we'll be chatting to you very soon. So I'm going to let you go, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time and attention.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.